On February 20th, 1978, a college student went missing near the frozen shoreline of Lake Michigan. His name was Stephen Kubacki, a 23-year-old student studying environmental science at Hope College in Holland, Michigan. That winter day, he had gone cross-country skiing alone in a rural area near the lake. When he failed to return, search teams began looking for him along the snowy terrain surrounding the shoreline. During the search, investigators discovered something unusual. Kubacki's ski tracks led across the snow toward the edge of Lake Michigan, but they never came back. The tracks ended abruptly near the frozen surface of the lake. There were no signs that he had turned around, no footprints leading away, and no clear evidence of what happened next. For more than a year, Stephen Kubacki was considered missing. Then, in a development that would turn the case into one of the most unusual disappearance stories associated with Lake Michigan, he suddenly reappeared. More than a year later, in another state, with little memory of how he got there. In the late 1970s, the city of Holland, Michigan was known for its quiet atmosphere and close connection to the shoreline of Lake Michigan. Located on the eastern side of the lake, Holland was a mid-sized community with a strong local identity. The area combined small-town characteristics with the presence of educational institutions, including Hope College, where Stephen Kubacki was enrolled. The region surrounding the city offered a mix of farmland, wooded areas, and access to the expansive shoreline of Lake Michigan. During winter, the landscape often changed dramatically. Snow covered the fields and forests, and the lake itself could partially freeze near the shore. Outdoor activities were common during the colder months. Residents frequently used the surrounding trails and rural areas for snowshoeing, hiking, and cross-country skiing. However, the same natural environment that attracted outdoor recreation could also present risks. Winter weather along Lake Michigan could shift quickly, bringing strong winds, low temperatures, and unpredictable ice conditions. When Stephen Kubacki disappeared in February of 1978, the setting played an important role in shaping the early assumptions about what might have happened. Search teams focused heavily on the lake and the surrounding snowy terrain, believing the environment itself might hold the answer. On February 20th, 1978, 23-year-old Stephen Kubacki left his residence near Holland, Michigan to go cross-country skiing. At the time, Kubacki was a student at Hope College, where he was studying environmental science. He traveled to a rural area near the eastern shoreline of Lake Michigan, an area known for wooded trails and open fields often used by local residents for winter recreation. When Kubacki did not return as expected, concern grew among those who knew him. A search effort was soon organized to locate him along the paths he was believed to have taken that day. During the search, investigators found a series of ski tracks in the snow believed to belong to Kubacki. The tracks led from the inland area toward the frozen shoreline of Lake Michigan. However, the tracks appeared to stop at the edge of the lake. Searchers reported that the trail did not turn back toward land. There were no visible footprints or ski marks leading away from that location. Because the lake surface was partially frozen and conditions were difficult, investigators considered the possibility that Kubacki may have fallen through the ice or been swept away by the cold waters. Authorities conducted searches along the shoreline and in nearby areas, but no confirmed sign of him was found. As the days passed without new evidence, the disappearance of Stephen Kubacki began to take on the characteristics of a missing person case with no clear explanation. As the search continued in the days following the disappearance, several details made the situation more difficult to explain. The ski tracks discovered in the snow appeared to lead directly toward the frozen edge of Lake Michigan. According to reports from search teams, the tracks moved in a straight line across the snowy ground and stopped near the shoreline. What investigators did not find was any sign that the skier had turned back. There were no returning ski marks, no visible footprints leading away from the area, and no clear disturbance in the surrounding snow that might suggest another direction of travel. Under normal conditions, cross-country skis leave clear tracks in snow, making it relatively easy for searchers to follow a path. Because of this, authorities initially focused on the possibility that the lake itself had been involved in the disappearance. However, despite searches conducted along the shore and nearby areas, no physical evidence was found that confirmed Kubacki had entered the water. Another unusual aspect of the case emerged much later. More than a year after the disappearance, in May of 1979, Stephen Kubacki unexpectedly reappeared in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, roughly 700 miles from where he had last been seen. According to accounts reported at the time, Kubacki stated that he had regained awareness in a field near Pittsfield, with no clear memory of the time that had passed since his disappearance. This development introduced new questions about how he had traveled such a long distance and what had occurred during the months when he had been missing. When Stephen Kubacki was first reported missing in February 1978, local authorities and volunteers began an extensive search in the area surrounding Lake Michigan near Holland, Michigan. Search teams included local law enforcement, volunteers from the community, and members of the Coast Guard. The effort focused heavily on the shoreline and nearby wooded areas where Kubacki had reportedly gone cross-country skiing. Because the ski tracks appeared to lead toward the lake and stopped there, investigators initially considered the possibility that he had fallen through unstable ice or entered the water. Cold temperatures and winter conditions made the search difficult, and teams conducted sweeps of the surrounding terrain as well as the nearby shoreline. Despite these efforts, no physical evidence was discovered that confirmed what had happened to him. No equipment, clothing, or personal belongings were located in the immediate area beyond the ski tracks. As weeks passed without new information, the search gradually slowed. Eventually, Kubacki was classified as a missing person, and investigators had little additional evidence to pursue. More than a year later, in May 1979, Kubacki contacted his family after reappearing in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Authorities later confirmed his identity. Following his return, law enforcement interviewed him to determine what had happened during the time he had been missing. According to reports, Kubacki stated that he had no clear memory of how he had traveled from Michigan to Massachusetts, or what had occurred during the intervening months. Because no crime could be established, and Kubacki was safely located, the investigation did not proceed as a criminal case. However, the unusual circumstances surrounding his disappearance and reappearance continued to draw attention in later discussions of unexplained missing person incidents. The disappearance of Stephen Kubacki initially created deep concern within the community of Holland, Michigan, and among students at Hope College. At the time, Kubacki was known as a college student with academic interests in environmental science and outdoor activities. When he failed to return from what was expected to be a routine cross-country skiing trip near Lake Michigan, the event quickly drew attention from classmates, faculty, and local residents. Search efforts in the early days of the disappearance involved volunteers from the surrounding area, reflecting the close-knit nature of the community. For many residents, the idea that someone could vanish during a winter outing so close to town was deeply unsettling. As the weeks passed without answers, the case gradually shifted from an active search to a missing person investigation. Conversations about Kubacki's disappearance circulated through the college campus and local neighborhoods, with many people wondering how someone could disappear along a clearly traceable set of ski tracks. When news later emerged in 1979 that Kubacki had been found alive in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, the development brought both relief and confusion. While the community was reassured that he had survived, the lack of a clear explanation for his absence left lingering questions. Over time, the case became one of the more unusual disappearance stories associated with the region surrounding Lake Michigan, often cited in discussions about unexplained missing person incidents. After the reappearance of Stephen Kubacki in 1979, several explanations were discussed by investigators and observers attempting to understand what might have happened during the 15 months he had been missing. One possibility considered was that Kubacki had experienced some form of psychological or memory-related condition during that period. According to reports from the time, Kubacki stated that he had no clear recollection of the events between his disappearance near Lake Michigan and his reappearance in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Situations involving memory loss, including dissociative episodes or other medical conditions, were sometimes referenced in discussions of the case. Another explanation raised by observers was that Kubacki may have intentionally traveled away from Michigan and later returned after a long absence. However, investigators never publicly established evidence confirming a deliberate plan, and Kubacki himself maintained that he did not remember how he had reached Massachusetts. Some accounts also noted that when Kubacki reappeared, he reportedly possessed items and clothing that did not match what he had been wearing when he disappeared. Reports indicated that he had a small backpack and maps when he regained awareness in Massachusetts, though the origins of these items were not clearly documented in official records. Despite these questions, law enforcement officials did not present a definitive theory explaining the disappearance. Because Kubacki was found alive and no criminal activity was proven, the case remained largely a matter of unexplained circumstances rather than a formal criminal investigation. Today, the disappearance and reappearance of Stephen Kubacki remains one of the more unusual cases connected to the shoreline region of Lake Michigan. After Kubacki returned in 1979, authorities confirmed his identity and documented his account of events. Because there was no evidence that a crime had occurred, the case was not pursued as a criminal investigation. In the years that followed, Kubacki continued with his life and later pursued further academic and professional work. Reports indicate that he eventually became involved in psychology and counseling fields. Although the case was effectively closed once Kubacki was located alive, the circumstances surrounding his disappearance remain unclear. No confirmed explanation has been established regarding how he traveled from Michigan to Massachusetts or what occurred during the months he was missing. For this reason, the incident is sometimes referenced in discussions of unusual missing person cases in the United States, particularly those connected to outdoor environments and unexplained timelines. The events involving Stephen Kubacki stand apart from many other missing person cases in one important way. Unlike most disappearances that remain unresolved, Kubacki eventually returned alive. Yet his reappearance did not fully resolve the questions that had begun the day he went skiing near Lake Michigan. Investigators had followed ski tracks that appeared to end at the frozen edge of the lake. For more than a year, there was no confirmed trace of where he had gone. Then, unexpectedly, he resurfaced hundreds of miles away in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Because the missing period was never fully explained, the case continues to draw curiosity decades later. It remains a reminder that even when a missing person is eventually found, the full story behind their disappearance is not always clear. For the community in Holland and those who followed the search in 1978, the mystery of what happened during those missing months remains an unanswered chapter in the history of the region surrounding Lake Michigan.